So, here we are again. It is late at night. I am recording audio, video. I am really tired, so I'm kind of out of my head. At this point, it's technically tomorrow. It's so late. I'm trying to improve audio by messing around with a few settings, and also I turned off the air conditioning and a few other things. Will this sound better, worse? Hell, I don't know, but we'll see how this pans out. And I really don't want to talk about politics, but I'm going to. So, yeah, we'll see how this works. I would murder people for coffee right now, but I need to go to sleep at some point. Lord knows. Alright, so recently, big hullabaloo in the news has been the, what's their name? The company Mylan or something like that. The guys who make the Epipen, or whatever it is. If you are allergic to bees or whatever, wasps, what have you, stab yourself with the Epipen, and you don't die of allergies. Of, what is it? I don't know. I'm really tired. Anyway, I wanted to talk briefly about this because it's in the news again. And when I say again, I mean we've gone through this before. Previously, I have no idea where to start. I am utterly incoherent right now. And it's a complex issue and I'm really tired. So this is going to be really weird. I need to get a beverage at some point. I'm going to have to get one before I can continue. But I want to talk about the Epipen, capitalism, drugs, the FDA, and, what was that asshole's name? Got it here somewhere. Hold on. Martin Shkreli? Martin Shkreli. The pharmaceutical guy from, was the daraprim. He raised the price. This was back in, God, I guess it was just last year. Just late last year. It feels like it's been longer than that. The anti-parasitic drug, daraprim, he acquired the company. I have a little bit of this information here. Basically, he acquired the company that makes daraprim, raised its price by 5,556%. That is to say, from $13.50 per pill to $750 per pill. Both of these instances, the what's their name, Tuville or whatever the name of the company that makes the Epipen, you can see the analogy here. It's like, evil corporation raises its prices once again to some crazy extent. So we must need more legislation. And here's I have like a couple problems with that assessment of that situation. I mean, you can see where I'm making the analogy between the two. They're very similar. Someone acquires this company, a company makes an important life-saving drug and raises the price by a crazy degree. For Epipen, it had been around $100 for that Epipen for one pen, I guess, and now they shot it up to $600. So it must be evil corporations, and let's be clear, neither of the two corporations here are good guys. No question there. But to level this attack at capitalism in general and the free market specifically is very off base, very inaccurate for either of these situations. So much so, I think, and I think there's good evidence to back me up on this, is that if we'd had more free market, freer markets anyway, if not necessarily a free one, at least more free than they are now, a bit less regulation, a little less interference, particularly from the FDA. In both these cases, not just these two companies wouldn't have raised their prices by as much, but they might not have been able to at all. That's my thesis. And by God, here I am in a video explaining that in like the first 5 minutes. Amazing. That never happens. Usually halfway damn through these before I even get my damn point. Alright, I need a beverage before I choke to death on my own spit. And I need to gather my thoughts. I'm really, really sleepy. Ugh. Oh, much better. As I said, I'm experimenting with the audio. I'm hoping this sounds less awful than usual, and I am more audible than usual. I'm also going to try to stop saying and mumbling incessantly. And I just did it too. How hilarious. Alright, okay. Starting at the beginning, let's go actually to the beginning and talk about daraprim. Daraprim is actually fascinating. It's an amazing drug. It's essentially an anti-parasitic and, I believe, an immunobooster. It's actually, let me see if I can find the little bit of information on this. So if I'm not mistaken, this is based on, I'm not even going to go through this. It's a pyrimethamine, or, okay, I'm way too out of it for this. In short, daraprim is based on a drug class that's been around since the 1950s. Very important detail in this story about the daraprim story. Oh. Because when you first make a drug, there's so much to explain here. I'm not well suited to it right now either. When you first manufacture a drug, you have exclusive rights to it. Just like if you write a song or a book or something like that, you have exclusive rights to use that until the copyright or whatever. Different versions of it. One for drugs, one for music, one for written works, and so on. But same concept. You invented something, you get a sort of state-backed monopoly on its use for a short time. Unless you're the music industry, in which case that short time is really not short. It exceeds your lifespan, and that's a whole nother argument that I could go on a tear about for hours. Either way, daraprim is no longer an exclusive drug. Anyone can do it. Anyone can make it. When the story about this sort of hit, where it's like, some asshole acquired this drug that's currently being used to combat AIDS, but previously the original versions of this in the 1950s had been used to combat malaria. It's been around for a while. So immediately the story sounded wrong to me. Like, this is a brand new drug? How did the drug get developed by a company, was widespread enough that enough people used it? It's not some experimental weird thing that a handful of doctors had tried on a handful of patients and maybe had used it just long enough to start to get results. That takes time. That takes a while. And so the company is suddenly bought by someone else, and that person raises the drug and people notice. that implies a longer time scale to me. Without looking up any of the information, everything about that story sounded wrong. Looking into it a little, every detail in that story was wrong. That drug has been around for a long time. Anyone could make it, theoretically. At least not in terms of exclusivity rights. Here's the tricky bit. The FDA has, in addition to, I don't know the exact terminology, but it's not just like copyright laws. There are also specific distribution rights on top of it. Those rights were created for a completely different reason. The purpose behind copyright patents and so on, for drugs, designs, what have you, they're there for a reason. Their existence, their benefits can be debated, but the concept is simple. If you're given a monopoly on whatever it is you invent for a short time, you're encouraged to make more stuff because you will benefit, or at least be given the opportunity, a good window to try to monetize your idea. If you can monetize ideas, if you can benefit from them, you can profit from them, you'll make more ideas. There'll be and people will support you and fund you and invest in you trying to make new stuff because they could profit from doing so. That's the concept. The flip side to this is, after your rights run out, they're open source. Open source isn't the right term, but you get the idea. The whole point of patent laws, copyright laws, is free stuff. It's you get to benefit, you get to profit monetarily, you get to profit from the thing you invented, but later on profit now, later on down the line, society benefits because there's more stuff for one, and two, we get free stuff. You no longer have the exclusive rights to make or record or whatever it is. That's why using music, which I'm certainly a lot more familiar with in the way drug patents work, the idea is that over time, music becomes public domain. Anyone can record or sample without having to pay the original creator, because the original creator has already had their chance to make money off of the thing they invented in the first place. That doesn't apply to daraprim. Not at all. These laws, the ones that prevent anyone else from manufacturing daraprim, are there to protect American jobs. Period. They are just there so that so that the jobs don't go overseas. Also important, because understand that daraprim is manufactured around the world. In case you thought that, what was the original jump? It was originally 1350, and then he knocked it up to 750 a tab. That drug is available in India, I believe, for 50 cents a tab, in case you thought that 1350 was a great deal. What's more is there are other places, Africa and so on. Like I said, this drug family is used to combat malaria. There are places in the world where it's still used for that reason, desperately needed for that reason. Also, the African continent has a lot of problem with AIDS, and that's a whole other thing in its own right. But places where American FDA laws don't restrict distribution rights like that, that drug is cheap. Really cheap. Never mind this manufacturer. That's the first thing I thought. Like, what prevents someone from saying, well, this guy's an asshole, I'll make this stuff myself in my own labs, maybe sell it at slightly above, cost, like, at cost plus 10%, 20%, whatever your margin needs to be, and there, it's available cheap in the American market. Not even necessary. This stuff's widely available. Just get it from somewhere else. Even with shipping costs, even if shipping costs are extraordinary, my God, it's so much cheaper. It's cheaper than it ever was. It's a fraction of the cost that it ever was in the US, overseas. The only thing preventing Americans from importing inexpensive daraprim is the FDA. Only thing. And that law exists only to protect the jobs of Turing Pharmaceuticals, the company that makes daraprim in the US. They had a huge, trial, like, you really didn't need to raise it this much. Understand, what was his name again? What was this asshole? And he is an asshole. Let's be clear on this. Martin Shkreli. Martin Shkreli. And whenever you see his mug on TV, he looked like an asshole. And he is. He really is. Let's go into that a little bit. Let's talk about this guy and how he's like a good, solid capitalist, shall we? All right. Martin Shkreli, whatever the hell this guy's name is not a good, solid capitalist. In fact, he's not one at all. He's not an investing genius. He's not a great entrepreneur. He's not a guy with a real instinct for buying stocks. None of that. That is not who he is. I bring that up because a lot of the narration, the narrative of what was going on with daraprim last year was that, typical capitalism. This is what free market capitalism leads to. These awful, the corporate suits, ripping off the little guy whenever they can with their evil money and investments and blah, blah, blah. No, not the case here. Not with Shkreli, whatever the hell this guy's name is. Martin Shkreli is an asshole and an investor that is basically found a way to game the system 6 ways to Sunday. He specifically used, I think he's actually in jail now. Well, so, good on that. I disagree with the motivations of the people who put him there, but it's probably where he belongs. Or does he? I don't know. Not my call. Either way. The way he would invest is he would short stocks. Briefly explaining that. You can invest in stocks where I think this stock will go up. Here's some money for it. And when it goes up, when it becomes more valuable, I can cash it in and I'll have more money because it's more valuable now. I paid money to get a stock. Stock went up in price. I sold that stock. I now have more money than I paid initially. One hopes. Investing in the stock market, especially for a single stock, like not horizontally integrated, is gambling, period, even in the best of conditions. You can also short stocks, where you basically say, hey, you're going to give me money, I'm going to lend out, basically doing the exact opposite, hoping that the stock value will go down. So I'll basically get a loan for a stock, say $100, but then it goes down in price, let's say down to 50. I have to pay off the price of it, which is now less than what I loaned, what I borrowed, so now I've made a profit by shorting stock, by expecting stocks to go down. Similar process, but it works the other way around. Shkreli would short stocks and then anonymously call in tips that maybe this company was doing some sort of unethical behavior or breaking laws when they weren't at all. But the FDA would unleash the hounds, basically run an investigation because they're required to. When investors found out that this company was being investigated for unethical behavior, illegal behavior, stocks went down in price. It's not just that he was gaming the system in a clever way. He was gaming it in a really asshole way. Basically just using the oversight mechanism, something the FDA does that I think it should do, but using it in a very wicked way, very unethical way, regardless, speaking of ethics, in business. So this is the guy, that's how he made his money, period. He's not a genius. He's not some guy who thought, I think this pharmaceutical company will take off. He's just a guy who's very familiar with the way regulation works, how it can restrict, how it can be exploited, and used it to that very end. So yeah, just he bought the company, jacked up the price because he could. That because of redistribution rights, distribution rights, the way the FDA runs them, which is in a very protectionist way, he knew that cheaper alternatives couldn't be invested in, and they could not be imported. Even though this drug, like I said, it exists elsewhere for a fraction of the price of the current American, of pre, Turing pharmaceuticals. That's my take on it. And those are facts. Look them up. They are readily available. Turing Pharmaceuticals. Martin, his name is spelled Shkreli. Sleepy people have trouble pronouncing his last name, as I can testify. So, yeah, just look it up. This is what I've said is absolutely true. I can blame Martin Shkreli, but I'm more inclined to blame the FDA for creating the situation he exploited in the first place. God, it's so late. It's 1 in the morning. Alright, as an aside, this is obviously a somewhat controversial topic, and definitely a sensitive one. I mean, there are people I know who, if they heard me jabbering on like this, would be kind of pissed off at me. Nah, nothing I can do about that. Because I really do want to talk about this. Every time I see it, it's like, okay, some of these facts are true, but other things are true too. We are human beings. We can't know everything or look at every single smidgen of data with every single thing we take in. We have to compress, we have to summarize. But often the devil is in the details. And it's worth examining the daraprim situation from last year in a little more detail, and the Epipen situation this year. Okay, the Epipen. Talking about the Epipen. The Epipen is fiercely regulated by the FDA. It's basically a controlled injection of a particular drug that costs like $1. I mean, I think you could get the equivalent of it if you had a syringe and the Epipen stuff. You could get something similar for like $10. How crazy is that? But let's talk about it. It's a simple technology. It's a self-injector with a particular drug. The FDA, like I said, very fierce in regulating this particular life-saving drug. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of the FDA. What the FDA does is important. So when it does it poorly, I would argue it makes it worse. I don't think the FDA should be eliminated, but it should definitely be scrutinized and reined in a lot of cases that it's not. The Epipen. So is it a similar situation to the daraprim? Kind of. Not really, but sort of. There are cheaper alternatives to the Epipen. They exist in the world. They are real things at a fraction of the price. And a fraction of the original price, not the $600 one, the $100 one. I think I had... OVQ was one of them. There was another one. Who was it? Adamis. To expand patent trials for a similar auto-injector. Alright. we gotta wrap this up, because I'm gonna fall face first into a keyboard and soon. Also, I have the air conditioning off to improve audio, and it's starting to get warm in here. So, briefly, why don't we I'll give Mylan, or whatever the name of that company that makes the Epipen, the finger, and just say, screw off, we'll just buy the cheap ones. Because you can't buy the cheap ones. FDA said no. FDA said no. They said no. The other companies that make alternatives to this are not permitted to distribute them. And the complaint about that is that the regulations for approving those drugs are not just kind of Byzantine, but also kind of ambiguous. When the FDA basically denies someone distribution, they don't have to explicitly spell out exactly why in great detail. And that's very expensive. I mean, if you're a company and that's one of your products, or your main product, or your only product, I mean, you're sitting there in basically hell. You've gone through all the trouble to create this company, invest in this technology, you have units ready to go, but you're not allowed to sell them until the FDA says so, and they're just kind of, we'll get to you when we get to you. Every day, every week, every month that they don't approve of it, or don't give you a clear answer as to why it's not approved, it just kills you. In a different environment, there'd be more alternatives to the Epipen. It's a life-saving drug. I mean, it is. It's a life-saving device, a system of sorts. Other people would sell them if they could. Other people who make similar devices. Why not just make, if we make injectors, or we make the Epipen juice, whatever the hell is in those things, why not just branch out? And it doesn't seem like that much of a stretch. But with that sort of stranglehold, and seeing the alternatives to Epipen, Mylan's competitors just dying off, it's like, would you risk it? Would you risk a company to do that? I wouldn't. Would you invest in that? I don't think most people would. So consequently, Mylan is the only story on the block. They're the only ones allowed to create and distribute this. So yeah, they can jack up the price. Competition would stop them. I mean, if you had competition, like even if they weren't as nice or as easy to use, like you had to fumble with them or something like that, like some people would go, man, I'd prefer to use the Epipen because it's nicer or prettier or whatever. But I can't afford those, so I use the cheaper alternative. Use the generic brand, generic Epipen, Jepipen or something, I don't know. But no such thing exists. No such thing is allowed to exist. Not for any market force. This is not the free market. This is not capitalism. I need to go off on a tear about that too. That's another video. No, this is pure regulation. And that's the thing that sort of sticks in my craw. Like, okay, I don't believe that the free market fixes everything. It's not magic. It's just giving people economic freedom, which has downsides to it. There are drawbacks to that. I think the benefits vastly outweigh those, but that's debatable. My complaint isn't about that. It's not that argument at all. My complaint is, call a cake a cake, This is not the free market making expensive EpiPens. It is the absence of the free market. What's more is you have politicians, a few of whom are running for president this year, saying, we're going to save you, literally, we are going to save your lives, people who rely on EpiPen, and I think I know a few people who are, in fact I know at least 2 people who are allergic to bee stings, deathly so. Literally, politicians saying, we're going to save your lives from these evil corporations, the threat of some half-assed witch hunt slash, Senate hearing will make them jack their prices down a little bit. And then, so-and-so, whoever presidential candidate asshole will get, look, I succeeded in my war for the little man. Nonsense. It doesn't get to the heart of the real problem. It doesn't keep this from happening again. Like I said, I just used 2 examples. This happened, and I didn't realize it was as recent as last September. I thought it was further away than that. I swear it was longer than that with the daraprim, but apparently not. It's going to happen again. Nothing's changing. No one's talking about changing it. Nothing's going to change. This exact same thing is going to happen with another drug or procedure probably soon. It'll get headlines for 5 minutes and then everyone will forget about it. A couple of politicians are going to pat themselves on the back. They'll probably get a couple votes out of it. Some company will drop the price by, 1 or 2%. And that's it. That's all that'll come out of it. And that's not great. Dealing with a problem means identifying first that it is a problem, and 2, correctly identifying the source of the problem, or sources. There's often more than one. In the real world, good things and bad are dynamic. They have multiple sources, multiple influences. In this case, I think the FDA is a very negative influence in its current format. I think, how would I fix the problem? I think we need to have a serious look at how the Food and Drug Administration in this country works. It's past due. It's really past due. I've just given you 2 examples. I mean, even if you don't agree with me, and even if you don't necessarily think I'm right, I mean, I'm certainly leaving out details here, maybe very relevant details. If you think I'm even a little right, it's entirely possible the FDA has killed people indirectly in both of these instances. Now multiply that by as many drugs that might be in a similar situation. How many people have died because of the FDA? I don't know. But I think probably too many. I think even a few is a few too many. I don't know. It's just my thought on this thing. I'm sleepy. I'm gonna edit this shit tomorrow and post it, because I really want to talk about this. Once again, please comment. I would like to have a discussion about this. More to the point, I don't just want to hear my own opinions echoed back at me. It's pointless. I could search the internet for someone who's, this entire thing that I've gone on about, someone else has had a much better articulation of this issue. For God's sake, the Epipen thing was in the Wall Street... Was it the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post? Let me check that. That's worth looking at. Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal, everything I've said about the Epipen part of that anyway, that's from the Wall Street Journal. I'm some just goof with a YouTube channel. But, I don't know. I think it's something that should be discussed, and I think it's interesting to discuss, and I'd love it if there was a larger forum for this, for the FDA, because right now I'm not hearing anything about, like, hey, let's re-examine the way the FDA does stuff and whether it should be allowed to do some of the stuff that it does, because some of its laws don't exist to save people's lives. They exist to save people's jobs and investments over people's lives. And if you have a choice between the two, you should definitely lean towards the former. Yes? Alright, I'm babbling incoherently. I'm half asleep now. I think that's it. I'm out.